I found out that my boyfriend was cheating on me with his homeboy. So a little background information, I was 18 and in my senior year of high school. I met my boyfriend Kevin in our junior year and then we started dating our senior year of high school. We had a really good relationship and we would talk almost 24/7. We would text each other all throughout class, we would call each other every night, stay on the phone for hours. We would even skip classes together and I thought that we were deeply in love. The only time that we wouldn't hang out was whenever his best friend needed him. Like, he would skip dates that we had planned and stuff like that. And I honestly just thought that he was being a good friend. But my best friend Taylor suspected that he might secretly be gay and cheating on me with his best friend. And I personally thought the only reason why she thought this was because his best friend was openly gay. But I didn't believe this because him and I were also intimate with each other. But then I started noticing some really weird stuff. Like the one day while we're sitting at lunch, Kevin and his best friend are sitting next to each other and I see them holding hands under the table. I asked him about this, he said it was because his best friend had social anxiety. Fast forward, the one time we're all at this party and I saw them kiss. Like, part 2 about how I found out that my boyfriend was cheating on me with his homeboy. So like I said, the one time I see them holding hands under the table and whenever I asked my boyfriend why he was doing that, he was like, oh, it's because my best friend has social anxiety. And I'm like, okay. And then fast forward, we're all at this party and I see them kissing. And when I confronted him about it, he was like, oh, like we just like to play pranks like that sometimes. And I believed him because I really didn't think that my boyfriend was cheating on me with his homeboy. So fast forward to his birthday. I wanted to surprise him, so I went to his house, and to my shock, I see Kevin hooking up with his best friend. And when I confronted him about it, he was like, no, like, I swear I'm straight, da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, bro, why are you lying to me? Like, there's no reason to lie anymore. I caught you. So at that point, I literally just left his house and I blocked him, and I even begged my parents to let me move schools because I was so embarrassed. And from now on, I learned to not trust guys who are too close to their friends. Like, any guy who chooses their friend over me now is sus. Part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped at a grocery store. So like I said, I parked all the way in the back of the parking lot. I mean, okay, not all the way in the back, but I was damn near close. So I go in and I'm not too familiar with this Target. I've only been here a few times because the mini market in my hometown is usually the one that I go to. So I'm looking around and I realize that there's this little girl following me. But it seemed like she was more like keeping an eye on me. Like she would stand like 20 feet behind me, but just like stare at me, you know, peek through the aisles. And she did that for like 10 minutes. But whenever I finally went up to the checkout, she was gone. And this woman came up to me. She was like, oh my gosh, have you seen my daughter? She was running around the store. I don't know where she is. So I described the little girl to her that I saw. And she was like, yeah, that's her. I can't find her. Will you please help me look for her? And I didn't have the time for this because my parents were going to wring my neck. But I said, Part 3 about how I was almost kidnapped at a grocery store. So like I said, she asked me to help look for her daughter and I was like, I'm going to go tell a Target employee. And she was like, no, don't worry. They're all already looking. They have security all over the place. And she was like, will you help me check the parking lot because I don't know if she left. She was like, I've been having them look for the past 10 minutes. So I didn't think anything of this because I didn't think that some lady would try to kidnap me. So I went into the parking lot with her and I'm like, okay, where do you think she would have went? Like, did you drive here? Did she maybe go to the car? And she was like, no, we live like 5 minutes down the road. Do you think that we could get in your car and drive around? And I said, yeah, because I thought that it would speed up the process. And my dad's truck was really high off the ground. So while we're walking, I'm like, I think someone's under my car. And she was like, what? No, it's probably just the shadow. And I'm like, no, there's someone under my car. So I turn around to walk back into the store and she starts like pulling my arm towards my car. So an employee called the police whenever I went in there and long story short, they were trying to kidnap me. Storytime about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So a little background information, I was 18 and it was the summer before my freshman year in college. And it was towards the end of the summer, so I decided that I wanted to take a vacation with a few of my girlfriends before we all went off to the different colleges that we were going to. And I have a lot of pets. I have 4 hamsters, 2 snakes, a tarantula, 2 birds, and 1 fish. So I asked her if she could watch all of them. She said yeah, so I wrote her out a schedule of when they need to be fed. And I wasn't even going to be gone a week, so it would be pretty easy because I already cleaned all their tanks and everything like that. And I wasn't worried at all because I trusted my sister. She had 2 dogs and a cat, so I thought she was going to be fine. I called her the first 2 days. Everything seemed to be going well. And I called her on the 4th day and she didn't answer the phone. So I called my mom, asked her if she could get a hold of her. And my mom said that she spent the 2 days at her boyfriend's house, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So like I said, I called my mom asking if she could get a hold of her, and she said that she spent the last 2 days at her boyfriend's house. And the worst part was, my sister was the only one with a key to my apartment. So my sister calls me the next day and she's like, hey, sorry, like I was at my boyfriend's house. And I was like, who fed the animals? And she was like, well, I just put enough in their cages so that way they would be fine for like 3 days. And she was like, don't worry, I'll sleep over there tonight to make sure they're okay. So I'm like having a fucking panic attack right now. Anyways, so fast forward, I get home early in the morning and my sister's sleeping on the couch, but my sister brought over her animals too. So I wake my sister up and I'm like, hey, like, how are all the animals? She's like, oh, they're fine. And then we walk into the kitchen and the fucking bird cage is open and my birds are missing and her cats are nowhere to be found. So now I'm freaking the fuck out. So then I go to check on the rest of my animals, like for part 3. Part 3 about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So like I said, we walk into the kitchen and the bird cage is open and my birds are nowhere to be found and neither is her cat. So at that point, I run to check on all of my other animals. Thankfully, the snakes were fine, so I go to check on my tarantula and he's missing. So now I grabbed my sister's dogs, locked them in my room, and I went to go check on my hamsters. Yeah, she forgot to feed them the whole week because one of them ate the other one. So at this point, I'm having like a mental fucking breakdown and I'm moving all the furniture in the living room and everything like that. And we lift up the couch and we see her cat bolt out from under the couch. After that, I look under the couch and my bird is literally torn into pieces under the fucking couch. A few days later, she texted me and she was like, hey, like, I feel so bad. Like, let me buy you a new bird and a new tarantula. And to this day, 2 years later, I still don't know what happened to them. Story time about how I found out that my coworker was cheating on her husband with my boyfriend. So a little background information. From 2022 to 2023, I worked as a receptionist at this hotel. And I was pretty good friends with one of my coworkers who was kind of older than me. I was 19 and at the time she was about 28 years old. And we're going to call her Jamie. Jamie seemed like a very professional woman. Like, she would hardly get into drama and everybody loved her at work. And we were all super thankful to have her because she was also a really good worker. Now, Jamie was married and she had a son who was about 3 years old. And she would always brag about how her husband treated her so well, which was weird because, girl, if he treated you well, why did you cheat on him? Be so for real. Anyway, so there was this guy who was working in the dining room area and he was extremely fine. Like, when I tell you every girl wanted to get with him, every girl wanted to get with him. But somehow him and I clicked almost instantly. Fast forward a month, him and I start talking to each other. He even introduced me to his family, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my coworker cheated on her husband with my boyfriend. Anyways, like I said, we started talking and he introduced me to his friends, his family, and we would hang out constantly. And things got pretty serious. Eventually, we only were exclusively talking to each other. Fast forward about 3 months later, the news got around about him and I vividly remember that some of the girls were annoyed that him and I were together, which is understandable because he was hot AF. But the person who was most mad was Jamie, and it was very obvious. She constantly made comments towards me about us. She would be like, oh, you two shouldn't be hanging around each other, you guys aren't gonna look professional, all the girls are gonna spread rumors. Like, girl, bye, you're 28 years old with a kid and a husband, get a fucking life. And then whenever him and I would sit together at lunch, she would look at us with these nasty looks. Well, fast forward, the one night him and I are hanging out, and then eventually she follows him on all social medias. But I didn't care though because I thought he was loyal. After my boyfriend accepts it, not even 3 seconds later, she DMs him saying, hey, with a bunch of Ys, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my coworker cheated on her husband with my boyfriend. So like I said, she DMs him not even like 2 seconds later saying, hey, with a bunch of Ys, and we all know what that means. It's flirty. But she didn't answer him, so she kept spamming him. So fast forward, after him and I were dating for 7 months, we started growing apart. Like, we would spend hours without talking to each other. We stopped going out to the point where it was causing huge fights. And then a week later, a rumor starts going around that he and my coworker Jamie slept together. I found this hard to believe because I feel like people were just trying to break us up. But unfortunately, these rumors were true because I did receive some pictures of evidence of it actually happening. So obviously this caused me to get into a fight with them because I confronted them about it. And fast forward, in the end, both of them were fired and they aren't together anymore, which isn't a surprise. And I don't know what's going on with her and her husband, but whenever he found out, he stormed into the hotel and made a huge scene, as anyone probably would. And now they're both banned from even entering the hotel.
Eva, Terrence called me and told me that you took Chantel to see a doctor. Wow. Did Terrence happen to tell you where he really was that week he was gone, Mom? Terrence is the head of his household, Ava. He does not have to share his whereabouts with you. Now, what is your problem? My husband doesn't love me anymore, and he's possibly cheating on me with another woman. Ava, men cheat. Let him have his fun. And stop worrying about what he might be doing, and start worrying about how you're going to keep a man who makes over $200,000 a year. Oh my God, Mom. Get it together. Are you giving it to him when he wants it? He doesn't want it. Well, it's your fault. You're so damn stiff. Loosen up and make him feel like he can have his way with you. Mom, I don't think I can do this anymore. Oh, shut up. Just shut up. What are you gonna do? You signed a prenup and you have...
Storytime about why you just can't bring some friends around your boyfriend. So a little background information. I was 17 and a junior in high school. And I had been best friends with this one girl who we're going to call Lily for about 2 years. Now, Lily and I weren't your ordinary best friends. We were the ones that would party together, but we would never talk about anything serious. And when I mean serious things, I mean like a secret that you don't want anybody to know. Just for a little example, the one time I told her that I thought I was pregnant, and clearly she knew that I was super scared, and I told her I don't want anybody to know, please don't say anything. In about 30 minutes, I had like 20 people asking me if I was pregnant, and then somehow my parents found out. She's also the best friend that you keep away from any guy that you like. Well, I have been dating this guy who we're going to call Jared for 6 months. And obviously now that I have a boyfriend, I've stopped hanging out with her as much. But my whole thing is she would never give me a heads up on plans. She would literally just text me and be like, hey, we're going out tonight. And I would text her back and I would be like, sorry, I can't. I already have plans with Jared. So this made her really upset, like for part 2. Story time. Would you call this cheating? So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. And I was dating this guy who we're going to call Tom, right? When we started dating, everything was super good. But a little bit into our relationship, I started to get the ick. Anything and everything he would do would literally irritate the hell out of me. So at that point, I told him that we should take a break. So we did. Well, while we were on this little break, I decided to go out with my cousin the one night. And she had brought this guy who she was talking to at the time. We're going to call him Jake. Jake and I had the same classes in school, but we never really talked to each other. Well, I started to get to know him throughout the night, and I realized we had a lot in common. I felt like he was flirting with me, so I decided to flirt with him. When we got home, I had told her how much I really liked Jake. We ended up FaceTiming and falling asleep on the phone together. We all hung out again the next day, and I invited him back to my house. Like for part 2. Would you consider this cheating? Part 2. So like I said, we all decided to hang out again the next day. It was really cold out, so I invited everybody back to my house. And when we got back to my house, we were watching horror films. And I was cuddling next to Jake on the couch. And listen, I wanted to kiss him really bad, but Tom and I had just gotten done with our so-called break. So I decided to be loyal and not do that. Well, a few days after Jake and I talking, I realized that I wanted to be with him and not Tom. So I decided to end things with Tom, and now Jake and I have been together for 1 year and 2 months, and we couldn't be happier. But every time that we bring up Tom, Jake always tells me that I cheated on him. Would you consider what I did cheating? Story time. I was the toxic best friend. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. And at the beginning of the year, I met this girl who we're going to call Riley. Riley and I hit it off straight away. Like a week after knowing each other, she knew everything about me and I knew everything about her. Well, then she tells me about this guy that she's talking to, who we're going to call Jay. She said that they would hook up sometimes and he would text her sometimes. But she said that I couldn't tell anybody because he said that it had to be a secret. So I tried telling her that he sounded like a fuckboy, but she decided she was going to do whatever she wanted. And I was like, okay. So fast forward to the end of the year, he adds me on Snapchat. Okay, don't get me wrong. He was really hot, but I had my own thing going on. So I really didn't pay that much attention to him. And I thought he maybe added me on Snapchat to be like, oh my God, I really like your best friend. And then I also was caught between a rock and a hard place. Do I tell my best friend that the guy that she likes just added me on Snapchat? Or do I lie to her? Well, I was going to tell her until I got a Snapchat from him, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I was the toxic best friend. So like I said, I didn't know whether I should tell her that he added me on Snapchat or if I should. And I was going to until I got a Snapchat from him saying, hey, you're really pretty. I think we should talk sometime. So I ended up telling her about it because I felt really bad. And she was like, this is why I can't trust girls. Like, you need to unadd him right now. Like, fucking block him. And I'm like, I didn't even do anything. Like, what the fuck? So whatever. I end up blocking him. It's fine. Until he texts me one day. And he's like, hey, it's Jay. I think you blocked me on Snapchat, LOL. And him and I had talked a little bit in school and I kind of started to like him. Well, fast forward, him and I ended up hooking up a few times. We were talking a lot. And he hadn't been texting Riley as much. Well, the one night while I was sleeping over at her house, my phone was going off a lot. And I didn't think to delete any of the messages, like for part 3. Story time about how my best friend and I were dating the same guy at the same time. So like I said, she was sneaking around with him. Meanwhile, she was telling me everything. He was buying her gifts. He was buying me gifts. So everything was perfect. But we had one little trick left up our sleeves. We decided that we would both make a wish list and put everything that we wanted on there. And at the end of the month, we would have a sleepover, bring everything that we got. Well, on the night of the sleepover, we brought everything, and let me tell you, this filled up my king-size bed. There was stuff all on the floor. So what did I do? I took a video of it, and I uploaded it to Instagram, tagging him and his friends, and wrote a long-ass caption, basically saying, if you cross me, this is what will happen. You'll get played. He was so embarrassed, his friends and everyone at school basically laughed at his dumb ass. Well, he ended up telling his mommy about it, and they came and talked to my parents, and they pretty much just told them to get the fuck over it, like your son did what he did willingly. She didn't do anything wrong. She meaning me. My dad was kind of mad at me, but my mom was super impressed about it, and we laugh about it all the time. Story time about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade. Well, at the end of summer, right before school started, this girl named Liv added me on Snapchat. And I had seen her all around school. She was very popular and a little bit stuck up. But I added her back and then I got a call on Snapchat from her. I answer very awkwardly and I'm like, hi? And then she was like, oh, I've seen you in a lot of this guy's pictures. Are you guys like best friends? And I'm like, yeah, sort of. And she goes, have you ever thought about dating him? It was just an extremely weird out of nowhere conversation. Anyway, so fast forward 2 weeks, I walk in the first day of school with my best friend Tommy. And Tommy and I have like every single class together. For some reason, Liv thought that we were friends and she would come and go as she pleased. Like Tommy and I would be standing at my locker. She would come over. Anyways, fast forward to chemistry. She walks in the class, winks at Tommy, like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So like I said, we were in chemistry. She walks in and she winks at Tommy. And I look over real quick and I realize that her nails were vermilion. That's Tommy's favorite color. And by the way, like I said before, I did not know this girl at all. We had never hung out. She never talked to me before this. Not to mention, anytime that her and I talked, she would only talk about Tommy. Fast forward a couple days, we're in chemistry, and somehow she got her assigned seat next to me. And she was like, hey, do you want to study for the chemistry test together? And I was kind of excited because I thought that I had a new best friend. So I said, yeah. Later on, she comes to my house. I never told her an address or anything like that, so I was very creeped out about how she knew my address. We studied for the test, and she goes, hey, do you want to hang out with Tommy and a few other guys tomorrow? Well, tomorrow was the day that I was going out of town. So she goes, okay, maybe next week. After being out of town, I came back on a Saturday, and the next day I get a text from Tommy, like for part 3. Part 3 about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So like I said, she asked me if I wanted to hang out with Tommy and a few other guys. I told her that I was going out of town. When I got back from out of town, the next day I get a text from Tommy. He was flipping out on me. He said that I was talking shit about him to Liv. And apparently I said that I was happy that his mother died. And a bunch of other bullshit. Well, after that, Tommy cut me off, so I was lonely. And I started hanging out with Liv more. Even though she said that terrible stuff to Tommy and made him cut me off. So fast forward a year, he is a new best friend, right? I get a DM from her on Instagram saying like, hey, did Tommy used to be your best friend? Pretty much everybody knew what happened between me and Tommy. But she was like, that girl that you're best friends with is dating him now. And then he completely cut me off. So technically, she used both her and I to get with Tommy. But after dating for literally like 2 months, he cheated on her because she slept with 5 other guys. Story time about how my best friend waxed off my eyebrow in my sleep, so I cut her hair. So a little background information. I was 14 and in 8th grade, and my best friends and I were having a sleepover. And right before we had went to sleep, we were all talking about this one TikTok trend that was going around. It's like this trend where girls would go and put wax on their boyfriends while they were sleeping and then take it off. Well, I didn't think anything of it, so that night I went to sleep. I should have knew this was gonna happen because I'm always the butt of the joke whenever it comes to our friend group. Like, I'm always the one getting picked on. Like, there was this one thing that my friend Ashley saw online. It was like, if you put white nail polish on your teeth, it would make your teeth whiter. So who did they decide to try it out on? Yup, me. And yes, I could have said no, but these were my best friends. I didn't think that they would intentionally hurt me. Anyway, so like I said, I go to sleep and all of a sudden I wake up in the middle of the night to something very, very, very hot on my face. I open my eyes and all of my friends are standing above me with their flashlights on. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend waxed off my eyebrow while I was asleep, so I cut her hair. So like I said, went to sleep, didn't think anything was going to happen, and then I wake up and all of them are standing above me with their flashlights on. And then I realized that Ashley has a stick in her hand. Once I realized that there was wax on the other end of the stick, I started screaming. So then Kelsey decides to cover my mouth. She's like, shh, it's not that bad, I promise, like, don't worry. I get up real quick, I run to the bathroom, and there's like this pink transparent wax on my eyebrow. It was about 3 a.m. and we're all sitting there trying to find ways to get this wax off of my fucking eyebrow. Well, then Amber goes, I'm tired of this, grabs it and rips it off my forehead. So I'm crying at this point. Like, I'm in 8th grade, I'm about to have my glow up, and y'all gotta ruin it with taking my eyebrow off. So nobody went to sleep for the rest of the night because they thought that I was gonna do something to them. So I acted all cool. I was like, no, it's fine, I can just draw it on. When in reality, I was going to cut this bitch's hair. Like for part 3. Story time about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade. Well, at the end of summer, right before school started, this girl named Liv added me on Snapchat. And I had seen her all around school. She was very popular and a little bit stuck up. But I added her back and then I got a call on Snapchat from her. I answer very awkwardly and I'm like, hi. And then she was like, oh, I've seen you in a lot of this guy's pictures. Are you guys like best friends? And I'm like, yeah, sort of. And she goes, have you ever thought about dating him? It was just an extremely weird out of nowhere conversation. Anyway, so fast forward 2 weeks, I walk in the first day of school with my best friend Tommy. And Tommy and I have like every single class together. For some reason, Liv thought that we were friends and she would come and go as she pleased. Like Tommy and I would be standing at my locker. She would come over. Anyways, fast forward to chemistry. She walks in the class, winks at Tommy, like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So like I said, we were in chemistry. She walks in and she winks at Tommy. And I look over real quick and I realize that her nails were vermilion. That's Tommy's favorite color. And by the way, like I said before, I did not know this girl at all. We had never hung out. She never talked to me before this. Not to mention, anytime that her and I talked, she would only talk about Tommy. Fast forward a couple days, we're in chemistry, and somehow she got her assigned seat next to me. And she was like, hey, do you want to study for the chemistry test together? And I was kind of excited because I thought that I had a new best friend. So I said, yeah. Later on, she comes to my house. I never told her an address or anything like that, so I was very creeped out about how she knew my address. We studied for the test, and she goes, hey, do you want to hang out with Tommy and a few other guys tomorrow? Well, tomorrow was the day that I was going out of town. So she goes, okay, maybe next week. After being out of town, I came back on a Saturday, and the next day I get a text from Tommy, like for part 3. Part 3 about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So like I said, she asked me if I wanted to hang out with Tommy and a few other guys. I told her that I was going out of town. When I got back from out of town, the next day I get a text from Tommy. He was flipping out on me. He said that I was talking shit about him to Liv. And apparently I said that I was happy that his mother died. And a bunch of other bullshit. Well, after that, Tommy cut me off, so I was lonely. And I started hanging out with Liv more. Even though she said that terrible stuff to Tommy and made him cut me off. So fast forward a year, he is a new best friend, right? I get a DM from her on Instagram saying like, hey, did Tommy used to be your best friend? Pretty much everybody knew what happened between me and Tommy. But she was like, that girl that you're best friends with is dating him now. And then he completely cut me off. So technically, she used both her and I to get with Tommy. But after dating for literally like 2 months, he cheated on her because she slept with 5 other guys. Story time about how I found out that my mom was sleeping with my history teacher to get me better grades. So it was my junior year of high school. And everybody knows that your junior year is the most important year of high school. If you didn't, well, now you know. My brother was in his senior year of high school, and when he was a junior, he had the same teacher, so he knew how hard the class was. So he would stay up with me every night helping me to pass my history class. Well, the one day I'm at school and I'm taking a test, and I literally did not know anything on the test. And I studied the night before for literally 4 hours straight. So I decided to copy off the girl next to me. Well, a few days later, we get our test back. And I'm looking at mine, and I got a 97%. And then I look over to the girl next to me. She got a 33%. And then I started going through the test. None of the essay questions looked like my handwriting. But I didn't say anything because I wanted that A. Well, the one night, I'm sitting down with my family having dinner, and I told them that I copied off the girl next to me, and how I got a 97% and she got a 33%, and my brother flips out like for part 2. Part 2 of my mom sleeping with my history teacher to get me better grades. So like I said, I told my parents that I got a 97, she got a 33, and I was telling them how the handwriting didn't even look like mine, and everything. And then my brother starts flipping out. In front of my dad, too. He goes, "Mom, are you fucking serious? You couldn't let her try and do this on her own?" And I was super confused. Like, I thought that maybe he was talking about my mom paid off the teacher. But then he said, "Yeah, Dad, if you didn't know, Mom's been fucking our history teacher to get us better grades." And then he goes, "Mom, you're such a fucking whore." And my mom's sitting there not even fazed. She just took a drink of her wine and said, "Get the fuck upstairs now." Before my brother leaves the table, he goes, "Maybe you can fuck Dad's boss too. Maybe he'll get a raise." And then I realized what was happening. And it's around 6:30 p.m. So after that, a lot of stuff happened. My dad obviously wanted to get a divorce at that point. So my dad took my brother and I to our grandparents, and we stayed with them for like 2 weeks. But then everybody at school found out, and we got made fun of a lot. And then after that, we moved schools.